All right, I'm going to say it again. Shabbat Shalom, everybody that's online, and Shabbat Shalom to everybody that's here today. And today's Torah portion is, anybody real quick? Is that a song?
That's who, Yavo.
You could just say, Ki Tavo, Tavo.
No, John.
No?
John.
I changed the word on that the other one time, and I said, Sandy, every time it sounds like this. And she goes, no, don't mess it. Don't mess me up. Okay, Ki Tavo. It's Deuteronomy, chapter 26. I should know it. Through 29. 9.
Well, the whole chapter.
It's not the, actually, it's not the whole chapter. Uh-oh.
What is it?
Hey, Shabbat Shalom. Hey, so can you give your testimony during service yeah, call in then. I'll in fact, I'll call you. And we'll put you on speakerphone. Okay.
Well, but
All right.
Daryl
Shalom.
won't hear it. Daryl won't hear it, though.
Huh? Okay. So if you want to hear the testimony, you got to tune in during our 3:00 service. Okay, that's how it's going to be.
Or sit in.
Or
They just sit in.
sit in. That's right. Okay. All right. So my markers are going dry for some reason. I guess I'm using them too much.
Trash bin.
All right. So you save this one. Do that one. Ki Tavo, Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 29, 9. And yeah, it actually stops in the middle of the chapter, right there at the beginning of chapter 29. And actually, yeah, 29, 9. That's it. So that'll start next week. All right. What does Ki Tavo mean? And then we're going to pray. When you come in. All right. And we didn't do last week. And I guess I want to do last week too. But, we're only going to stick with this week. And if you'd missed last week, you're just going to have to pull out an archive, okay? And just go back and do that. All right. By the way, did everybody enjoy Eddie last week?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that was huge. And anybody that's watching online, if you hadn't, and you want to go back over that stuff again, because he gave so much information, go back online to the Life of Worship channel and watch them. It's foundational. And
we'll go through some of it too to bring it down.
And the implications of that is really, really, really big. We'll probably start getting into that sometime after Sukkot, probably into November. And because it is really, really big. And so y'all need to stay tuned in.
Father, we come before you right now and we give you all praise and honor and glory. We thank you, Father, for who you are and what you've done and what you're doing in us, through us, and amongst us. We thank you, Father, that we can come and gather online here together in this building and beyond, Father, and that your words can be spoken that are truth and life to our bones, to our bodies, to our hearts, to our spirit. Father, open our eyes to see and our ears to hear so that we would see and understand all that you would have for us today, so that we would not reject or ignore those things that you want to say, but Father, they would fall on good ground and bear great fruit within our lives. Father, stir within the people to gather online, Father, and to come into this house, Father, now for the feast that you've given us. Let us ready our hearts and let us be a sacrifice of worship before you as we pour ourselves out on the altar. Father, giving ourselves unto you at your appointed time, on your appointed day. Bless Pastor John as he brings forth, as he leads us, Father, so that he says all that you would want him to say. We thank you for that. We give this time and this day unto you. Thank you for calling us to gather together. In Yeshua's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. By the way, you look absolutely gorgeous today.
Well, thank you.
Okay, just thought I'd catch you off guard. All right.
I don't think you even said that on our vacation.
He meant to.
He was saving it so he had it.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's too much going through my brain and I have to push stuff out to get the other stuff in. And I had to work during vacation. Okay, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Okay. All right, so let's go to chapter 26, and let's begin reading, and to kind of give us a little bit of a layout. But I'm not going to read the whole chapter. I need someone to read chapter 26, verses 1 through 19. Let's just read that. Well, that means the whole chapter. So will someone read that for us?
What version you want?
Whatever version you are in. I may pause you in the middle of those readings, but
I will do it.
okay. Thank you, Joy.
When you have come to the land Yehova your Elohim has given you as an inheritance, taking possession of it and settle there, you are to take the first fruits of all the crops the ground yields, which you will harvest from your land that Yehova your Elohim is giving you. Put them in a basket, go to the place where Yehova your Elohim will choose to have his name live. You will approach the Kohanim and holding office at the time and say to them, today I declare, Yehova your Elohim, that I have come to the land Yehova has sworn to our ancestors that he would give us. The Kohen will take the basket from your hand and put it down in front of the altar of Yehova your Elohim. Then in the presence of Yehova your Elohim, you are to say, my ancestor was a nomad from Aram. He went down into Egypt, few in number, and stayed. There he became a great, strong, populous nation. But the Egyptians treated us badly. They oppressed us and imposed harsh slavery on us. So we cried out to Yehova our Elohim of our ancestors. Yehova heard us and saw our misery, toil, and oppression. And Yehova brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand and outstretched arm and great terror with signs and wonders. Now he has brought us to this place and given us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Therefore, as you see, I have now brought the first fruits of the land which you, Yehova, have given me. You are then to put the basket down before Yehova your Elohim, prostrate yourself before him, and take joy in all the good that Yehova your Elohim has given you, your household, the Levite, and the foreigner living with you. After you have separated a tenth of the crops yielded in the third year, the year of separating a tenth, and have given it to the Levite, the foreigner and the orphan and the widow, so they can have enough food to satisfy them while staying with you, you are to say in the presence of Yehova your Elohim, I have rid my house of the things set aside for God and given them to the Levite and the foreigner and the orphan and the widow in keeping with every one of the mitzvot you gave me. I haven't disobeyed any of your mitzvot or forgotten them. I haven't eaten of any of this food when mourning. I haven't put any of it aside when unclean, nor have I given any of it for the dead. I have listened to what Yehova my Elohim has said, and I've done everything you ordered me to do. Look out from your holy dwelling place from heaven and bless your people Israel and the land you gave us, as you swore to our ancestors, a land flowing with milk and honey. Today, Yehova your Elohim orders you to obey these laws and rulings. Therefore, you are to observe and obey them with all your heart, all your being. You are agreeing today that Yehova is your Elohim and that you will follow his ways, observe his laws, mitzvot, rulings, and do what he says. In turn, Yehova is agreeing today that you are his own unique treasure, and he promised you that you are to observe all his mitzvot, and that he will raise you high above all the nations he has made, in praise, reputation, and glory, and that, as he said, you will be a holy place for Yehova your Elohim. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Does it say anywhere in there that he was going to do away with all that? No, it does not.
You know what's really interesting, and as we get into this, I think, Joy, you just brought up something. It's really important because there's three different things that we know: the hukah, the mishpatim, and the mitzvot. We'll go into details more about what those are by definition in terms of the Hebrew and what we understand from them. But let's jump over into our old Christian mindset. Okay. Can we? So because Joy, you brought up a really good point, because some people say, well, that does not pertain to us any longer. Well, then I have a question for you, because this is where from our old Christian beliefs, we try to hold two thoughts in our head at the same time, which is impossible. So they'll take out one part in order to hold on to the other part. And some would say there's actually this fight between James and Paul, right? So what did Paul teach? And a lot of people go back to Ephesians, which says that it's by grace you've been saved through faith, not of works, lest anyone should boast, essentially, right? And yet on the other side of it, I think we brought it up when Rick was here a couple weeks ago, and we were kind of talking about the same type of thing. The other line of thought happens to be with James. Do you know James says almost, some people, they don't understand where James is coming from. They're saying that he's saying the exact opposite. That you tell me you have faith. Well, I'll show you my faith by what I do. Right?
Well, yeah, because if you have faith in the commandments, you're following the commandments, you have faith, those commandments are true.
Yeah.
And Yeshua said, I come not to do away with the commandments,
But
to
fulfill.
What they don't understand too are that they were doing them wrong. I mean, Yeshua came to show them how to do them.
Uh-huh.
They were doing them wrong.
Yeah, because they kept adding, they were they were adding to and taking away.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Which was really good. Okay, go ahead.
Be hypocritical.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
well, let's go. Oh, go ahead, Daryl.
James 2:14 through 26. I'm not going to read it. It says, faith without works is dead.
Faith without works is dead. And really, and we talked about that before, faith, emunah, is faithfulness, loyalty. Without works is
Well,
yeah,
let's go back to what Eddie was showing us. And scripturally, it's right there. Is that who was in power at the time of Yeshua? It was the Pharisees. It was that system over the true priesthood, which was the Zadok priesthood or the Essenes, that were pushed far off. And everything the Pharisees wanted to happen was happening. And of course, we're going to talk more about that after Sukkot and things. But the bottom line is, of course, they were doing things wrong because the Pharisees were following Babylon.
Yes.
They were following the Talmud. They were following all of those old ways. And when I say Pharisees, it's not just them. The people in turn, and we're all following. They were of that line instead of the line of Zadok, which was following, which as Eddie proved to us last week, is the true priesthood, where they were following. They were spirit-filled, full of life-giving, focusing on Yeshua and worship.
About the priests being from Esau, they weren't even
They weren't even the
from the
tribe.
tribe of Levites. They were.
That's right. Well, yeah, you can go forward, and they weren't even Hebrew.
At the time of Yeshua, it was they were Edomites that was holding the priesthood. Yeah. So okay, and going back to the passage that Daryl was talking about, being hearers, don't be hearers of the word only, but doers. Well, get this. That word, which Eddie was talking about, describing the priesthood, the Zadok priesthood, or the Essenes. The Essenes. And this, well, how in the world do you get Essenes and Zadok priesthood, and how is that connected? It's lost in translation. Well, this appears to have a connection, and I don't know how to spell the word, so I'm just going to phonetically put it out here on the board. I'm just going to, forgive me for my lack of Greek knowledge, but there's a Greek word called Essenes. And I don't know how you would spell it with a direct transliteral, from the Greek. That word in the Greek means doer. Doer. So the Zadok priesthood called themselves, they didn't call themselves necessarily Essenes. The Greeks called them Essenes, and because they called themselves doers.
They also called themselves the Way.
They call themselves the Way. So it's very, and this all comes out of the Dead Sea Scrolls, that they were the doers of the word, as opposed to that priesthood that was in Jerusalem. The evil, they would be led by the wicked priest, and the sons of darkness versus the sons of light. And the sons of darkness had developed their own system, and they came up with a different way of doing things. They set up a different, all these different rules and these boundary lines. They said, well, for example, let me give you an example. The Essenes taught that you are not to leave your house on the Shabbat. So in many ways, the Essenes were pretty strict. And so you weren't supposed to even leave your house. And so you stayed in your house. In fact, to the very point of, and this is in the writings in terms of their community rules, they were like, you can't leave your house. In fact, the bathroom was up over the hill where a big community latrine was. And so you had to hold it for 24 hours. And then, I'm telling you, they had these community rules that were in the Qumran writings, and this kind of tells you what's going on. But on the other side, the Pharisees that were leading the people over there in Jerusalem said, well, you can only go so far from your house, otherwise you're laboring. And so they could say you can take an object from your household and set it the prescribed number of paces from your front door and say, this is still within my household. And if you cross that place, and you can go up to that point of your object and say, well, I've got so many more paces that I can go. I mean, they created a whole nother rule system. Now get this. In Jerusalem, they set up a wire that went all the way around the entire city. And if you lived within that wire, now that's your entire household. So now on Shabbat, you can go anywhere in the city because you're still in your house. And even though it's just a wire, it doesn't have a covering over the top like a roof or anything like that, they said this is your household in order for you to be able to go visit, go walk your dog, or, I guess they didn't have dogs to walk back. I don't know if they had dogs to walk, or household domestic animals, who knows? But on the other side, they had these extra rules. So, but when it comes down to it, what did Yeshua teach? Did Yeshua say there are boundaries?
Well, not the boundaries they had.
Not the boundaries they had, but the main thing was, who was this Shabbat created for? Are we created for the Shabbat, or the Shabbat created for us? And so it is not. So in other words, I think Yeshua even said this: if an ox falls into the ditch, who's going to leave it there?
Nobody.
Right. You're gonna pull.
If to stay there, leave him there. If he is not, pull him out.
So in other words, we have these guidelines that we live by, but there are times that to preserve life, then, we're not going to ignore life and preserve the well-being and not preserve the well-being of others or our livestock, that which God's given us stewardship over. So we have to really kind of consider, is it healthy to have to hold it for a full day and then wait till the next day? I mean, honestly, so you got these different dynamics going on, but this is a community standard, not necessarily a biblical standard. But on the other hand, what were the Essenes wanting to do? They were wanting to preserve that which was handed down by Moses, the written word, and to be doers of the written word, like Joy was talking about, where the Christians have this dynamic, it's two opposing thoughts where they can't quite justify. James must not really mean what he's saying because Paul says, I don't have to do works. Essentially, they're saying, I don't do works. That works is, by definition, a doer of the Torah. A doer of the Torah. And some would say a doer of the law. Well, we don't have to do the law. Paul just said, it's a doer of the word. Well, if they're saying we don't have to be a doer of the word, then how can we ever qualify for the kingdom? Because we choose not to follow the king.
We can't.
And so
You're not in the kingdom.
So here, and we're going to go into this a little bit later on. Hopefully we can get there. But I want to hit verse 18, Deuteronomy 26, verse 18, where it says, and Yahweh has today declared you to be his people, a treasured possession, as he promised, and that you should keep all his commandments. So if we, think about the treasure, the parable about the man who found a treasure in the field, buried in the field. And so what does he do? He goes and sells all that he has in order to get that field that has the treasure in it. Who comes out better?
He does.
He does. So he could buy this because the treasure was bigger than all that he had. So he sold all that he had to earn that much more. And a lot of times we think about that as a believer saying, oh my goodness, I found this special treasure that was in the field. That's the kingdom. That's the gospel of Yeshua. That's what we've come to know, the best Torah that's been handed down through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we think, okay, this is great. I found it. I'm going to give up everything. And we do lay down everything. But did you ever think about this? A man gave up everything. He gave up heaven and came to earth because of this special treasure that was in the field. So he sold it all in order to have this possession. And who is this possession? It just says it right there. Today, Yahweh has today declared you to be his people, a treasured possession. We're the treasure that was in the field. The field is the world. And we're his treasured people. Where's Segula? Segula. Yeah, the people that are the treasure. So then what does that mean? If we're so treasured, then why would we have a conflict in our mind about being a doer of the word and not just a hearer only? So sometimes, that treasure in the field, from the Greek way of thinking, we always think about ourselves as the center, but think about it as he's the center, and we are the expression of his great love for us. We are the treasure that he gave everything for. Okay. All right. So that's just a thought that I had. And so is there a conflict between Paul and James, Yaakov?
No.
Because many times within Paul's writings, he talks about that he quotes from the scripture. He pulls out these different things that are right from the Torah. So anyway, so being a keeper of the word is saying, wow, if we have these wonderful commandments, then for them, by the way, it wasn't a big stretch because it's built in to their into their way of life. For us, it was not built into our way of life. And so making a shift sometimes is a lot more difficult. Okay? All right. When you go out. So let's go back to verse 1.
Which chapter?
Chapter 26.
Okay, that's good.
And it says, then it shall be when you enter the land. Or when you, I said when you go out, when you come in, when you enter the land, when you come into the land, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you as an inheritance, and you possess it and live in it, that you shall take some of the first fruit of all the produce of the ground, which you shall bring in from your land that Yahweh your Elohim gives you, and you shall put it in a basket and go to the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to establish his name. Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. When, this is where we have this key part. When. Translation of when can also mean that. It can also mean for. It also, and then also when. But there's one more that I want to bring out. It can also mean because. Didn't you, Twyla? Okay. I thought you said that in the background, Twyla. Because. So let's maybe reword this opening phrase of this Torah portion that says, because he is bringing us in, let us give him our all. So think about this. When is good, but because. Why what does it add to our understanding? Because he's bringing us in. What does that tell us about him and this whole journey?
He wants us in the house.
He wants us in the house.
He chose us too. It was his choice. We are his chosen ones, right?
Yeah.
He chose us.
He chose us, and he took us. He brought us out of the land of slavery. He brought us, and now he's got us to this point because he's bringing us in. And then what is the first thing that he's telling us to do when we come into the land? Okay, the first fruits of the ground. So, yeah. So when we come in,
But
he.
you're going to declare, not only that, you're going to declare that he gave you that land, and he swore that he would give it. He's keeping his promise. He's being faithful.
Yeah.
Because he promised this land.
Okay.
You're to declare that.
And we're to declare that. And that's what we see a little bit down there in verse 4 and 5. We get this confession that's made before the priest. It also, so let's look at that word, Tavo. And do you see something, if you write it out phonetically, being that letter is
It's both.
bait, it's pronounced a V in this case, but we would call it a bait. And so we have Tavo. So what does bow mean? Bow. It means
Come to enter in. It
come.
has the same idea of entering into the house of a husband or entering into judgment even. Yeah. Or to just anyway.
Okay. So to enter in, of course, we see that in my translations, is when you enter the land, when you come into the land. So how about this? To enter, come in, to come upon, to fall upon. How about this? Attack, as in terms of attacking the enemy.
Wow. Yeah.
So let's step back for a second. You had something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. If it also has this meaning, attack, as in terms of an enemy, enemy. Okay. If it has this meaning in terms of attacking an enemy, when you enter the land, or because he's bringing us in, because he's bringing us into a place, there might even be an enemy there. But what's the first thing that he asks us to do? I'm going to go back to that question again.
Let him fight.
He says, then you're going to take some of the produce of your hand and you're going to bring it to the priest.
Right.
So in other words, you're going to come into the land, and the land is going to have fruit on it, and you're going to take some of that land, because they have vineyards that they didn't plant, right? They had homes that they didn't build. And they're going to say, when you come in, guess what? You're also not only going to be able to come in and bear fruit in the land, your land is going to produce, but you're going to be able to go in and attack. Now, that is an offensive word, not offensive, but it's offense. Okay, so hold on that thought for
But
just a
if you
second.
go too far, then it will pass. So,
Okay. So simply what we're looking at is this: what is it when we choose to follow Yeshua? When we come into the land, when we find ourselves as that treasured possession. Because what's going to be in the land? The people. Segula, right? The people that are the treasured possessions. So he is decreeing right here, it's not only you're going to go in and have the fruit of the land, but it's going to be wiped clear of all of your enemies. Those same enemies that 40 years ago, the ones that on the second time around, I told you you're going to go in, you're going to defeat the enemy, and you wouldn't believe it. And then you want to go on your own and you got defeated. Okay, this same enemy is now yours to defeat.
That's right.
It was theirs to defeat the first time, but they didn't believe.
They didn't, right?
That's, they did. So that's why they got lost the war, because they didn't believe it. They didn't follow what Jesus told them to do.
Yeah.
To go right in and do it. They denied him, and then they decided to do it by themselves. They got beat.
Right. Do you ever notice something, that the place that they're standing at right now, getting ready to go into the land, is not the same place that they went in the time before? There was Kadesh Barnea. But this time it's across from Jericho. So it's a different place. So they don't even have a memory of what happened the first time. It's bringing them in by a new way, a different way. Okay, Sandy, what was your thought?
Okay, I want to go back with this whole concept because it does play into what you're saying. Because here we had all those commands last week, which anyway, and this week the commands, what we're looking at, are really talking about how to bring your offering, how to bring your tithe, how to bring ourselves, how to bring that before him. And so when we look at this Tavo or bo, which is that root, then it also goes back to Genesis. When did we first see something brought forth? Well, we saw it in Genesis 2:19 through 20, when Adam was looking at the different things being brought before him and say, would any of these serve as a helpmeet? And was there one suitable for him? And of course, that's Mrs. Adam. Was eventually, we come into all that. But you add that to the meaning that's first used in Genesis 4 about bringing the offering. And when did we first hear about an offering being brought? It was for Cain and Abel. Okay, so we've got those two things. The first Adam had things prated before him, looking for a helpmate. Well, now we have this idea, and with the offering, they had to bring forth an offering. It had to bring forth their first fruits, their best. So you have the same idea now when Israel is being prepared to go into land. They are being paraded before second Adam.
Yep.
They are being paraded by Messiah as potential helpmates to go into that land. Are they suitable? Are they the suitable bride? Are you suitable? Are you ready in your heart? Are you willing to even bring anything? Are you the suitable bride? So the results are really of what's about to happen are really hinging on what they've done with the word. What have they done with the commands that have already been given to them, that have already been presented before him? The all those things which, really are Yah saying, these are the instructions. And what are you doing with them? And the offering that they are bringing before him is going to be, remember I said that bo also means to be inspected or judged. So that means he's going to look at what we're giving forth.
Right.
It's not just going to be, that's why it's so important whether we're giving him praise, whether we're burning on the altar, whether we're giving him the best of what we have, which we're commanded to do, give forth your tithe, and then offerings are where the increase comes in our lives. He's looking at what's in our hand. And when I went through the tithe and offering before, I said, we are judged by what we give. The word says that you are under a curse when you do not bring in your tithes and offerings, Malachi 3 verses, well, you can go through 8, 9, 10, you can go all the way to the end there. And so right now he is showing us that I've given you all these commands. Now I want to see if you are ready for me. Are you ready for me to take you into this house, to this promised land, to my house? Are you ready? And what have you done with what I've given you? What are you willing to give? Are you giving me the broken, second best, broken, whatever, or nothing at all? What is in your hand? So we shouldn't be shocked that the commandments here deal specifically with the way to bring the first fruits, the way to bring your tithe, because we can go into cognates of that word too and end up with the ark and some other things and see how that connects to all of that. So really it's a bridal condition, what we're looking at here. We're about to be with our bridegroom. We're about to go to the land that he has promised us, and he is examining us, how we've dealt with what he's given us and how we're giving back to him. And if we don't do what he's asked us to do, that enemy won't be wiped out. It may have been there, but that protection hand is gone, and the enemy will take over. And that goes back to what Mom always said. As long as you're following what you're supposed to do, you're under the covering. But you speed up a little bit, Sandy, and you're not under the covering anymore. And who knows, if the cops come or whatever and give you a ticket, it's your own fault because you weren't under the covering, because you weren't following the rules. We weren't following his instructions. So everything is setting this up. It's partly bridal language and how we're giving back to our bridegroom.
Okay. Yeah, very good. So since Sandy brought it up, this also gives us an illusion, or maybe it's even a direct reference of what they did or what Moses said back in Exodus as well. She brought out Genesis account of Cain and Abel, but let's look at Exodus 25. Exodus 25, and I think there's a direct connection here, which kind of gives us a little bit more understanding. Exodus 25, beginning with verse 1. And this is in the Torah portion, teruma, which means offerings, contributions. And it says, then Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, tell the sons of Israel to raise a contribution for me. From every man whose heart moves him, you shall raise my contribution. And this is the contribution which you are to raise from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet material, the linen, goat hair, ram skin. It goes on and on. It lists a bunch of different other things out.
It's not just vegetables? I'm sorry. I had to go there because so many things.
Okay, no, then let's finish the list. I don't want to skip over it because you brought up a good point. Blue, purple, and scarlet, fine linen, goat hair, ram skins, dyed red, porpoise skins, or that could say beaver skins, acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil, and for the fragrant incense, onyx stones and setting stones for the ephod and for the breastplate. And let them construct a sanctuary for me, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I'm going to show you, as the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all the furniture. Just so you shall construct it. Okay. Now we have this illusion of this gathering and these contributions. When you enter the land, this land is going to produce. This land's going to produce for you. Well, how does the land produce? Well, that's where Deuteronomy 28 comes in. The land produces when the people are observing all that he tells us to do. The land does not produce when we fail or we pick and choose all that he commands us to do. And so therefore, what is the purpose of these contributions? If we relate it back to Exodus chapter 25, and we can also take it to Exodus chapter 36. In verse 3, 36:3, Exodus 36:3 says, and they received from Moses all the contributions which the sons of Israel had brought to perform the work in the construction of the sanctuary, and they still continued bringing to him free will offerings every morning. In other words, how do you still produce more? Is because the land continues to produce. So you bring in that first fruit and it causes the land to continue the production so that our land is fruitful. We are fruitful as people. The works of our hands, a lot of people say, well, I go to my job, I get a paycheck. There's the works of my hands. I think it's bigger than that. I think the works of our hands is called the works of righteousness. Everything that we think, everything that we say, everything that we do as doers of the word, when we follow his word, guess what? It produces. Now, it's going to produce good fruit. It's going to produce bad fruit. Everything that we do, say, think, it produces fruit. So is it going to be fruit of righteousness or is it going to be fruit of wickedness?
Well, yeah.
So, in other words, there's consequences for how we are doers. Because if we're not going to be a doer of the word, we are going to be a doer of our own word or the word of Hasatan. Any way that we want to put it into that type of picture, each will bear fruit. And so, therefore, we can also look at, okay, if we are bearing bad fruit or evil fruit, as Sandy was talking about, then we open ourselves up for attack. Yeah, we go into our garden and we see just an abundance of things that are growing. But there are a few that where we, in fact, in particular, because when I'm looking for squash bugs, I'm also looking for the fruit of squash and zucchini. And I can see when I'm lifting up those leaves, oh, there's a female and there's a little flower on the end. Father, pollinate this fruit, this flower, so that it can grow. And then a few days later, if it didn't get properly pollinated, what does it look like? It withers and it dies. So can we apply that spiritually? I think a lot of times what we have to look at is that we live, let me put it in this. We live in a fallen world, so it's always a challenge. It's always a challenge. And when things don't work out the way we want it to be, when the garden doesn't produce the way we want it to be, it could be to a number of different things that are outside of our own control. So we certainly want to make sure that we control what we can control, and that is to be able to be doers of the word, to be able to let that fruit of righteousness exist to its full potential, so that we're not part of the failings of it. And so, but what are some of the other things? I mean, so this is what he's saying. This is what's going to happen when you go into the land. He's talking about over in Exodus, the contributions that are going to be for the tabernacle and this tent of meeting in the wilderness, the furnishings, the oils, the incense, that which is going to make the priestly garments, all of those type of things. Can we draw a parallel that entering into the land and giving our first fruits is about this tabernacle, not made by human hands, but that which he has made, and we're contributing to that. Okay, Twyla.
We need to step into this. Sometimes we look at your garden instead of our pocketbook, just to talk about that. Your garden is not going to stay nice if you don't water it. It's not going to stay nice if you let the weeds grow and you just walk and hang around it.
Tending the garden is required.
Right,
Yeah.
Carelessness. Okay. He expects that same thing out of us here. If he says you've got a plank in your eye because you're pointing at somebody else's, he expects you to tend to the tiniest little thing that he has given you to do. He says certain things, and your kneading bowl will never be empty. That means that's your bread, that's your food. But we get careless. I don't feel like doing it today. It's too hot out there. You know how hot it is? I don't want to go out in that weather today. And then it's gone. If it's gone, of course, I didn't have any little boys to put on my cucumbers anyway, so, but, it all wilted, the cucumbers just turned up because of the heat. So even with the water and stuff, it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And we need to explain it to ourselves, I think, sometimes as if we were about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And then take it from there.
Yeah.
Because we don't need to, I did this, halfway.
Uh-huh.
Have to.
Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing. What's wonderful about this is our desire is to bear fruit, isn't it? So don't you think he comes up behind us to bolster our knowledge base, give us tools to be able to cause it to prosper, as opposed to saying, okay, I did my part, God, you do your part. But he's like, well, here's where I'm going to contribute to you. I'm going to give you somebody like Betzalel and Oholiab. I'm going to give you some skillful craftsmen that's going to be downloaded with a spirit of wisdom. And they're going to be able to do things that they didn't even know how to do. But it's going to come out and it's going to be so beautiful. Well, so I'm going to, like, Sandy, I have a question for you. When we first started doing gardening in our backyard, how well did we do it?
That is terrible. I got the first thing I started with. Of course, I've done it before at Mom's house. I had Mom let me do a garden at your house, and we had one at our other house. But when we started it at this house, I didn't tend the garden like I did. I bought like 4 tomato plants. I put them where the pool was, and I just watered them, and that's it. Remember them?
Yeah.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
It was terrible. But since that time, every year, I got better and I learned how to do it. And every year I'm still learning.
So we're building on those experiences, and there's a plethora of resources to refer to that say, this is what my tomato plants look like. Somebody help me.
But it's still experiential. So much of it you've still got to learn through experience.
Is this, is this disease? Is this pest? Is it, what's going on? And then how do I rectify it? So what happens is Yahweh connects us with the right resources to enhance the skills that we have, because why? He wants us to bear much fruit.
But here's the deal. To bear much fruit, you have to tend the garden. Our garden, our physical garden this year if you haven't even seen it in the last week, it is unbelievable. We are so blessed. It's unbelievable, but it has to be tended. It has to be watered with the word. And by the way, I do speak the word and sing the word over my garden. It has to, and it's as well as our life, it has to be given the Son, Yeshua. I'm talking about us. It has to have nourishment from the word, that nourishment that sometimes have to feed the garden. You have to do all these things. In other words, you have to work the word. You have to work the garden. You have to follow the procedures that need to be done. You need to follow his instruction. So yes, that works in a physical garden, but it works here. And this is why he's telling us, here's the thing about, I'm going back to what this so much is about. It's about what we're bringing. We have this tendency to fall into man's financial system. And we want to live in the world's way and wonder how we're going to be taken care of. He wants to get us out of the world's way concerning our finances and do something that seems completely absurd and give even when we don't have the money. That's the word, because all of a sudden then you do have money. I'm going to go back to Jesse Duplantis. He's sitting in a seat, and Yah says, give $1,000. He said, well, that's all I have. He said, well, that's all I asked you for. Give it. Because we need to learn to release what he's given us, because it's not ours, but we need to learn to release it back to him so we get out of the world's financial way. And when we do it any other way, when we still double dip in the world and do it its way and dip in his kingdom, that's not going to work either. We have to follow one way. And he's examining us and making sure we're following his instructions so that we will be fruitful spiritually and physically. It's not easy. Every day this week, what have you heard me say when I get up in the morning? I don't want to go.
I want to go into the garden.
No, I don't want to go water.
I don't want to go
this-
water. That's it.
Yesterday, I mean, I was like, I don't want to go water. I don't want to. It's 7:00 in the morning. I don't want to go out there. And that's how I felt. It doesn't matter if that's how I feel. It doesn't matter if you don't feel like working the word. It doesn't matter. You do it anyway because you love him and because it's obedience and because you do want to be fruitful.
So on a practical level, let's talk about a current event. I'm not going to stick there. I don't want to diverge too much, but right now they are introducing the CBDC, the
Don't say,
which is the digital currency.
oh, that, okay.
Okay,
I heard
Okay,
some on that,
which
yes.
means they're going to elevate the central bank digital currency.
Yep.
And they're going to diminish the US dollar. So that means
It's happening right
the
now.
cash that's in your pocket will have less and less value, and they're going to elevate this digital currency. But the digital currency is connected to everything. So, so if we're not good citizens according to the way of the world, then our CBDC will
So can we trust in
decrease.
the world's way?
no. And that's what I want to say is that we going to participate in that system, which is really it's one of the prongs to the beast system, or are we going to be living in an economy outside of that to survive? We're told to come out of Babylon. So think about this. A lot of people will say, okay, I understand what you're saying, but on the practical sense, on a material level,
I'm not coming out of Babylon when it comes to my finances. is what
because
you're saying.
I have to feed my children.
Or let's say if you're tied, if you are looking for the government to support you in any form or fashion, and I know it's hard because we're there, a lot of people are there, that money is going to be tied to you doing what they want you to do. And that may send you go, what am I supposed to do then? You trust in him.
So
All that you've given, he remembers that. He's got you. I'm going to go for an example. I mean, it hasn't come to complete fruition yet, but Yahweh's got you, doesn't he? He's showing himself even this
Yes.
very day how wonderful he is to you, Twyla. That he is giving you something that would be a desire, not even a need.
Something that was taken, something that went without.
that was stolen.
And I just said, Lord, if, you know. and
What was
now
that thing that was stolen from you?
My
Grand
I
piano.
had a 7-foot grand piano and I played it all the time. Jonathan used to play with his feet. He'd sit on the side, but he would just in his diaper, you know. But I have been without a piano
Like that.
like that for, well, they took
Since you moved into the new house.
20 years.
98.
to me, that took my worship. That's where I worship, was
Yeah.
playing that piano and singing those. It didn't matter what the rest of y'all heard, God heard me.
Yeah.
But without that, I have been kind of, without.
So it also bears then this whole
She didn't get to
idea.
finish, though.
Did I cut you off?
Yeah, because now
Well, Sandy was called this week and asked
if I wanted a baby grand piano,
and she says, no.
y'all been in my house? Do I have room for a
No.
baby grand?
No.
Depends how baby.
She says,
Not really.
It's this
I
big.
told her no, and I says, well, I
Have to move the
want
dining
one.
room table
And
out.
she said, I never thought of that. She says, you have room and everything. I said, Cindy, I got 3 living rooms. I think I got room. So, we're gonna find out more about it, but she wants to get rid of it.
So
All over here.
So I want to, as we're talking about this, and we're talking about this land that's supposed to produce for us, and then we're supposed to give of the first fruit of that. It also speaks, and Sandy was bringing this, in order for it to produce, we have to tend it, provide the water. In fact, we have to do an extra thing besides water. We put the sun shading over it, the shade cloth over it to protect it because of the UVC rays. That's what destroys the gardens right now. But it also tells us, really it's telling us, we're talking about the CBDCs, we need to be able to produce for ourselves. We need to be able to produce for ourselves, and God's given us the ability to do it. Be encouraged. You think, well, here's my circumstances. I don't know how. But he says right here that we are, okay, it's in the same Torah portion. Let's go back over to this Torah portion. And
Tell me what topic so I know where to go.
It's chapter 29. Verse 5. And it says, and I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. Your clothes have not worn out on you, and your sandal has not worn out on your foot. You have not eaten bread, nor have you drunk wine or strong drink, in order that you might know that I am Yahweh your Elohim. So, and then in verse 9, it concludes and also goes in, look at the enemies you had to face. When you reach this place, Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out to meet us for battle, but we defeated them, and we took their land and gave it as an inheritance to Reubenites, to the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manassites. So keep the words of this covenant to do them, that you may prosper in all that you do. In other words, he's saying, I want everything. I want your whole heart. I want you to possess this land, but there's an exchange.
That's a key word.
There's an exchange. So we talked about that parable about the treasure in the field, and that y'all's looking at us as that treasured possession, and yet we have to say, is he our treasured possession in the midst of all of the world? In all the things that the world are we willing to sell it all so that we can have that which is most important? And therefore, then how does that apply? Is Babylon, how powerful is Babylon in our lives? Because we're told to come out from her. So how strong is Babylon? Are we going to hold on to systems? Are we going to hold on to the governmental ways, the money systems, the bartering and the trading of Babylon, their health systems? Or are we able, because all of that's going to be connected to the CBDCs, by the way. So, or are we able to say, no? Are we, that soul test, our mind, will, and emotion test is set before us this day. This day, choose who you'll serve. As for me and my house, we will serve
Amen.
Yahweh. And so how big is Og in front of you?
How big is the giant?
How big is this giant? A descendant of the Nephilim, a descendant
Yeah.
of the fallen angel. How big is that before you? Yeah.
I realize that everybody is going to face this very same thing, and I just give you permission to tell me word for word. Everybody has a job of some kind, and we are provided for from that job. Some of us get to have a job, retirement, that comes all from the government.
Okay. Well, let me put it this way. And I know where you're going with it. I know where you're going with it on that.
Well, at some point, I'm going to not be able to use it. I
Yeah.
realize that.
But it is something that you did work for.
I did work for it.
Okay.
It's not handed to me.
But it may come to the point of it being cut off because of these very same issues. Yeah. Okay.
That's
He will provide. Here's the thing: is I have the same thing. I see what we have to do to work, and so my giant is that I cannot see over or around. Is what are we going to do whenever that thing goes away? If it does,
Well, I figure he's gonna take care of us, and we may not know how he's gonna do it.
Right.
But he's gonna do it. And I have been, for the last, well, my life, I was taught that you gave, if Grandpa gave you $1 bill, you took it and tore it all up and put 1 penny of it.
Well, that's, you taught us that way too.
And so,
That's
but
what I was taught.
I mean, at some point, I realized that that's not gonna be there. But I started being faithful with my tithing way back when. Even when I had to put it in my Bible where nobody knew where it was until I got to the appropriate place to get it there. So that is always, I've been faithful. And I think that's why sometimes, well, this last year has been kind of a lot of, but I don't have that much money. But I pay the bills and it well.
Okay, let me
So,
ask you, do you have food on the table?
I do.
Do you have shelter?
Yes.
Do you have clothes on your back?
Yes,
Are you even able to go to congregation every week?
I do, and I will go as long as I.
Well, what I'm saying is he provides, and that's what we've got to get in our heads is, do we think we're any different than all the people throughout the world and throughout history that have been tested in their faith?
What I was
But-
gonna
okay.
say was, during this time, it's there, but I don't know how it got there.
See,
I honestly don't.
Okay, let me give you this example. Okay, you guys know that John and I have always, when we talk about giving or even the other areas of our life, we've been tested in it. And if you guys know, you've seen us tested in it. I'm going to go back to the example. John, I mean, he didn't make 6 figures or even close to that, but he did well. He worked for a named company, insurance company here. He was the boss. His stats were better pretty much or as good or better than anybody in Texas. And then he got a Yankee new boss that comes in, finds out he's pastoring, and says you either get fired or you quit pastoring or you get fired. And folks, we made that money. I think when we got our bonuses, it was 70. So that, I mean, for a lot, that's still nothing. But for us, that was when we got our bonuses. And so we lived off that whole amount of money. You do, don't you? You have this tendency to do that. And so we went in 2008, November of 2008. Oh, we'd just been to the doctor. That's a whole nother story. And I started reading Blessings and Curses. And this wasn't on purpose. It just happened to be at the same time. And you know this, but I'm going to remind you guys of this. We immediately went from that to 70 grand to zero income, period. And and we had nothing for months and months, and then very little for the next. We're still not even close to where we were. Very little for the next 5 years, and we're still a fraction of what we once did. But y'all had already set things in motion and in place. One of the things that cost us so much money was all my medicine. Okay, you guys know this, but I'm saying it again because not everybody needs to be. So there's a need. Well, Father, how are we supposed to take care of this? I need this. I need this. Well, it so happened that I was reading Blessing and Curses, and I said, man, I suffer from every symptom of curse except for the suicide thing that I know about in my family, and I started breaking things off, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I went from a minimum of $500 to $800 a month on meds to, I had taken myself off meds before. I always ended up in the hospital, but I broke those curses, got some deliverance, and all of a sudden I took 0 meds. Guess what? That added money to our budget. Somehow, some way, even though you finally got some unemployment, we still have our same home. The bills somehow got paid. I can't tell you how. Now, sometimes did you go in and say, oh, there's rice and cream of chicken and some green beans. There's dinner. Did you get to eat like you once did? Maybe not, but you was fine. But he's going to take care of us. And I want us to remember, we will all very, very possibly be tested in this area. Or who do we trust? I remember telling John, I said, we're pastors. We need to live what we preach. We always say, trust in Yah, not in man. That man and our job is just your seed. And you don't trust in that. You trust in Yahweh to provide. We have lived it. But there's going to be a point in time if society threatens us like they are, we're probably all going to be living it. But guess what? There's provision. Maybe I've learned how to garden and I'm canning to take care of my family. Maybe that's what God's doing with you. You're learning some things and some skills and setting them in place so y'all can take care of you. And then the supernatural comes in because we serve a supernatural God. And we have this tendency, if we are not tithing giving, we're still thinking in the world's terms. So we're thinking worldly and not supernaturally. My Yah is a supernatural God. Yah, there can be manna on the ground that's going to serve me for food. There can be money fall from heaven. There can be a bag of coins lost over here. There can be, my garden can be blessed. I have brothers and sisters who have something where I have nothing. The provision will be there if we trust him. But we've got to get out of the world's financial system and stop doing this, close-fisted in our giving, because, and I'm not just talking financially, I'm talking in every area of our life, close-fisted because we're worried, well, what if I don't have enough? What if I need this for me? What if? And when we learn to open our hands and pour out to others, we cannot outgive Yah.
You can be and will, and I have this from experience. You will do it because you've been told to do it. And I remember when you were in school in Tulsa, and Mike went with me, we came down to see you. Well, I had not gone in to do my books that day because we went to Tulsa. And so my cash was my special drawer. And we got there, and this kid did not get his money from his parents to stay for Thanksgiving. And I sat there and I thought about it, and they came up and he didn't have it, and they weren't sure what to do. And I said to Mike at the time what had happened, and he said, Mom, you have to follow God. And so I went back in there, and all it did was take my tithe from here and put it over here. It was still the same amount. But we're too quick to say, well, I've always done it this way, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And that particular time, I came over and he says, "This is here." I said, "I think this is from Yah." And he was so excited, he didn't know. But if I had not been willing, I couldn't have been part of that.
And you couldn't have been blessed. And I've always seen you blessed when you give. Remember too, as a real quick reminder, remember when Jonathan's tuition was due at the International House of Prayer? I remember I told you, I kept thinking God's going to provide over Christmas. At that time, the Christmas season, because people are giving. Yah's going to provide on the after services or before services. It comes Monday morning, nothing there. Yah tells me to go about. Look in all the places where I get my $5 bills and $10 bills. Because if you guys give me money, I'm not a spender. I go find some little place and I stick that $5. Well, when I went and did it, he needed $1,746 or 76. I think it's 46. And for his tuition, and a $5 bill was a $50 bill, a $10 bill was a $100 bill, and I had $1,702 extra.
Yep.
Guys, that's supernatural. So, are we going to be okay when this stuff hits? Yes.
If you have faith, you will be.
What?
If you have faith, you will be.
That's right. Well, yeah, but tell me, if we're worrying and fretting and contemplating and fretting, worry, or is that faith?
No, that's the devil working on you.
When I
You
took
don't
her
give
to,
to get.
yeah, right. When I took her to Oklahoma City, the first time she had to enter those doctors, we took a minimum of money to drive for gas and one hotel room. And Sandy had to be taken in emergency to the downtown Oklahoma. And so we got back. Well, our car had been broken into. And the lady that had said God sent her, told her to go with me, she didn't have any cash except like $100 to eat on and stuff. And so we sat down and I says, well, I've got this. And she says, I've got this. And we panned it out. We didn't have extra, but we panned it out. And this is what we used, both of us, to get back to Amarillo.
See, I didn't know that part. I know the part concerned me. I didn't know that part of that story.
But he is there and he does do it. And we've just got to learn to be better hearers.
When you went to Oklahoma, did the car break down that same weekend?
No, that was when I locked the keys in the car and the back seat was unlocked all the time.
Uh-oh. So, okay, so let's move on because I want to tie a couple different things in. First off, it over here in Deuteronomy chapter 26, Deuteronomy 26, verse 1, he's telling us that Yah gives us an inheritance and you possess it and live in it. You possess it and live in it. I want us to remember something is that everything we're doing right now, if we rightly follow what his word tells us to do, we're being prepared, we're being trained, we're being disciplined to possess the land. So everything that we're doing right now, why do I say this? And even if our faith is imperfect, because like, well, my faith is not there at these levels. I can see it, but I'm not there. Can anybody relate to that? I can truly relate to this. And then go over to chapter 29, verse 1. These are the words of the covenant which Yahweh commanded Moses to make with the sons of Israel in the land of Moab, besides the covenant which he had made with them at Horeb, okay, Mount Sinai. So remember, covenant promises are bigger than where we see our faith, okay? Covenant promises are larger than us. Very important. In other words, Yahweh being a covenant maker, he made a covenant with Abraham. Abraham was put into a deep sleep or a trance. It was only Yah through the burning torch and the smoking furnace that walked between the pieces. So the covenant relies upon him. And get this. He said, and Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, you have seen, ra'ah. Ra'ah is that word. It was a Torah portion, ra'ah, to see beyond what you can see in the material world. You have seen all that Yahweh did before your eyes in the land of Egypt to Pharaoh and to all his servants and all his land, the great trials which your eyes have seen, and those great signs and wonders. In other words, you saw things in the material world that were beyond your understanding in the material world and your spiritual understanding. It was too big for you. And he goes on and says, yet to this day, Yahweh has not given you the heart to know, nor eyes to see, nor ears to hear. Because they were so definitely tied to the material world. And yet, then he goes on to say, but look at your clothes. Look at your sandals. Look at the enemy you defeated. Look at what you ate on. Did you ever go without water where you died of thirst? Were you tested in these things? Yeah, because y'all wanted to see what was in your heart. So is it easy?
No.
No. Will it be easy?
No,
No.
but it'll be worth it.
But we're going to see great signs and miracles and wonders
That's right.
that we're going to say, we won't notice it in the middle of it, but somehow, like Sandy was mentioning, we get up the next day, the next year, several years down the line, and somehow I don't have that big salary and bonuses like I had before, but here we are. We're still surviving. We're still living, and we're still giving testimony of that living. And yet, go back to chapter 26, verse 16. In fact, 26, verse 16. This day, Yahweh your Elohim commands you to do these statutes and ordinances. You shall therefore be careful to do them with all your heart and with all your soul. You have today declared Yahweh to be your Elohim, and that you would walk in his ways and keep his statutes, his commandments, and his ordinances, and listen to his voice. And then we start going in and we start talking about the curses of Mount Ebal and the blessings of Mount Gerasene. Okay. My mind went blank on that. Mount Ebal and Gerasene. There it is. I had to see it. Okay.
Us saying it wasn't enough.
I didn't pronounce it right. Terry did, but I didn't. So what was the first thing that they were supposed to do when they crossed over? When they crossed over the Jordan and they went to Mount Ebal and Gerizim. What's the first thing they were to do? It says in chapter 27, verse 1, then Moses and the elders of Israel charged the people, saying, keep all the commandments which I command you today, so it shall be on the day when you shall cross the Jordan to the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, that you shall set up for yourselves large stones and coat them with lime, and write on them all the words of this law, this Torah. When you cross over, in order that you may enter the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, a land flowing with milk and honey, as Yahweh the Elohim of your fathers promised you. So, what are these big stones? I would love for them to go find those archaeological digs and find the stones, because they were there at those two mountains, these two shoulders. It's where Jacob was buried. No, I'm sorry. It was at Joseph. Joseph's tomb is there. Joseph's tomb is there. Jacob was buried in the tomb of Abraham. So Joseph is buried there. And you know who possesses that part of the land now? The Palestinians. Anybody that comes in that does not have an Arab guide, they're gonna throw rocks at the buses. They're going to harass the people. So you have to go in with an Arab guide just to go in and see Joseph's tomb, because he was buried right there. But what is right there? These stones. Tammy, what are those stones?
Boundaries.
Boundary stones. What are boundary stones? Yahweh was setting his marker right there at the place where they enter into the land and say, this is my land. It's nobody else's. If they divide the land and they allow that land to be totally given over to the Palestinians, they're dividing the land.
And there's curses on that. That's why there's curses.
Why do we think there's blessings and curses?
Yes.
Why do you think those boundary stones had all of the words
They've taken a lot
of this
stuff.
law, of this commandment given to them right there to establish this belongs to y'all?
By the same token, are we not supposed to be boundary setters ourselves, having the word etched in our hearts and our lives, reminding others of what they should and shouldn't do? Don't cross this line. Don't do this, because those stones also represent a stone is a living stone, which is us, which builds the tabernacle. We are the tabernacle, and it should be etched into us. And we are to be saying, follow Yah's way. We are our brother's keeper.
And actually, if you think about that, okay, what were the first set of stones written on that Moses broke?
Sapphire.
Tablet. Oh, sapphire.
Sapphire, which it says when the elders sat there and had that covenant meal. Remember what I talked about? That it was the footstool where Yah's feet were on sapphire.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, heaven is written on our hearts. There's the boundary stone. Let him continue to write this word. And, sometimes we like to try to delete his word. But we've got to allow that engraving to continue, because we are living stones before him.
We're not gonna realize that we're getting in the way at times. And we have to ask the Father to show us and to teach us, because one little move means somebody's likelihood, the baby bottle that needs feed the baby in the midnight. I've read an article where a man was woke in the night. He says, go over to Allsup's, buy a gallon of milk and go to this address. And he did that, and the couple was praying and crying because the child was crying and they had no milk. So we're going to have to look for it in other places than our checkbook.
Yeah.
So, and there is, we need also to remember the verse, and I don't quite know how it fits in, but when my faith is kind of low, I use it, and that is where the wealth is, or
The wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous.
that one.
Yeah.
I preach that to myself when I'm not wanting to. And then the other thing we need to do is checkpoint our spending. Is this really something I need? Is this something I need in the future?
Mhm.
Or is this better than that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We just have to teach ourselves.
That's a really, really good point, because who was I talking with? I talked to a customer earlier this week, and it was a retired couple, and I was looking at their vehicle, and she was telling me, you know what? There was a time when I would go to the store and say, I want to get this clothing item or this type of thing, and I would just buy the stuff that I wanted because I wanted them, wanted to have them. So now it's different. So I just don't need all that stuff anymore. In fact, I'm trying to get rid of stuff. And because she's like, the shift that's taken place in her life is the value. In the past, we have placed a lot of value just to have material stuff. I need a new dress. I need new clothes. I'm not going to have a new dress. New pants. I need new tennis shoes. I need new hiking boots. I need whatever. And so I need a new car. How many people change out cars every 30,000 miles, 60,000
I don't
miles?
know that anybody in this room does that.
No, there used to be a time that people at so many miles would get a new car because it was time to get new. Okay, I'm about done with this payment system on this car because we have a 3-year plan, 4-year plan, 5-year plan. Now I'm going to trade it in and get a new payment plan so I can drive a new car. I mean, this is the mindset of the American people.
But I don't believe he wants us to, I
Yeah.
believe he wants us to have, I agree with you on that. We have to put his needs first. But I believe also that he doesn't mind us sometimes treating ourselves, okay? If we're blessed, we're blessed. If you're blessed to be a blessing, you bless other people. But then I believe there comes a time when he wants to bless us too.
That's true.
okay?
That's
Mhm.
absolutely true.
I don't believe we have to walk around like this and be
No.
ourselves and give all our money
You
away.
don't.
I do not
You
believe
don't
that.
have to do that.
But I believe we have to put him first, and we have to do the alms. What do you call them? The second.
Alms for the poor.
There's
Okay.
3 ways to give.
And that's in
We
this,
have to do that. But
and
then,
this is in the Torah portion,
yes,
actually.
but then he does bless us with things sometimes. Okay.
Well,
I'm
and
not going to be ashamed because I got a nice ring on or I got a new blouse.
no, I don't. And
I'm
he's
not
not
gonna
saying that. I
I'm
think
not
what he's
saying
saying is that there may be a time and a place, or in our lives, we find the things that once were so important to us aren't as important anymore.
Well, yeah.
Like clothes. I haven't been clothes shopping in years. Now, John did take me on vacation. There was a pair of shorts on sale, and he bought them for
See,
me.
that's what I'm.
But that wasn't.
It doesn't hurt every once in a
But
while. to
it-
get
but-
something
but-
nice, okay?
But when their old
it's-
ones
I
are
don't care.
worn out, it's important to be able to replace it when you need them, right? This is a difference between
And was-
I just have to have a closet full of stuff, or it's time to replace.
It might be time to replace.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
just was gonna say, I kept mine 25 years.
You did.
And I
it was
watched
still
mine
working
good,
good,
so.
so.
Yeah.
I'm glad
I'll
you're
keep them
having
long
tires.
He got some new tires.
I did. I bought some new tires this
I
week.
Yeah.
told you, it was getting pretty iffy.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, my carpet wears out if I can't.
There was
I'm
an
gonna
evil,
get
there was
different.
actually an evil thing. There was an evil thing that was done on Wednesday night after we had the Truth About Cancer showing. It was dark, and there was a strip of wood.
Somebody placed a strip.
It was
across the whole
perfectly
road.
placed across a lane of traffic down on South Washington, turning onto the loop, right there in that turn lane, perfectly placed.
Wow.
And I ran over it, and the next morning, Sandy comes in.
I said, you have 2 flat tires.
Oh, wow.
But
And-
guys, let's look at it this way, John. And I haven't said that we haven't had this, but what if, y'all allowed that to happen? You said, well, God didn't protect. Maybe y'all allowed that to happen. So later, when you're going down the road and you hadn't replaced that tire yet, and it could have blown out and injured you or somebody else.
Mhm.
So that way, it happened on the way home. It happened at night before you got going. You could take care of it. So your life and other people's lives weren't in danger.
Yeah.
See, we've always got to look at the way we look at things.
Yep.
So maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was meant for evil, but it was
Right.
turned around for His
And-
purposes.
And actually,
Awesome.
yeah. And Michael said, hey, you got something going on with your tires last week. And I knew that the one tire needed to be replaced. It wasn't losing air until Michael saw it.
Well, maybe
That
you
was the
did
first
for
day I
your
lost.
safety.
And then I'm like, okay, I got to deal with it, but I'll get paid later on. And so I put it off all week, where did
Yeah,
I
put it
drive? I drove to Dalhart, and I drove to Clovis and I drove to Memphis this last week on that
So
tire.
maybe Yah was trying to get you didn't listen to the first source, so he did it a second way.
So he made me get another flat tire. So I it's like, okay,
allowed.
yeah, allowed, so that I could go out and buy.
Yes,
I
he
did.
do that.
Yeah. And so I did have to get I just went ahead and bought all 4 new
But do you
tires.
see how the perspective, if you look at it
Yes.
from another angle,
Yes.
because your first words, it was an evil thing, but maybe it was an evil thing that Yah needed.
Turned around for good.
Yeah, for
Right?
your protection over somebody else's.
For his glory.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. Now, so when we're talking about all these different things, there is a mentality that we've got to break out of. And when it says, going back to chapter 26, verse 1, so we're hitting all over this Torah portion, by the way. We're not just sticking on verse 1. All right. I just want to make that clarification. But there's a very important word because this is the intro verse. And it's talking about possess. That word possess in the Hebrew is yarash. It's translated in my Bible as possessed. Does anybody else have it as a different word? It's what? It's verse 1 of chapter 26. It's what? Possess. Okay, so everybody's having possess. It can also mean, it's from Strong's. If you're writing, you want the Strong's H 3423. 3423, if you want to go refer to it yourself. Yarash. It means to dispossess. It means drive out. Oops. Pardon the size of my letters. I'm writing like I'm in kindergarten. Okay. It means to expel. It means to disinherit. It means bring to ruin. And it means to destroy. It can also mean to take possession of an inheritance, occupy, or seize. So when we go into possess the land, what's that alluding to? If we're to possess the land and we think about, okay, we're going to go in and if we got it, we're going to drive out something, expel something, disinherit, cause something else to disinherit it.
There were people living there.
Yeah.
Obviously, so I think that's.
So it's alluding that it's the land is full.
And the previous owners are going to be driven out.
There's something possessing it. And we have been given this opportunity to take that, but the land cannot hold both.
You've got to empty it out.
It has to be emptied.
And there's a commandment, in one of, I don't remember exactly, it was one recently that when you go in, you are to, he doesn't like those erect things, and so you were to go in and just crush them down and just put it to dirt. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of those things, those structures, those things have been built up. The places of the idol worship
Yes, yes.
and all those things have to be torn down. Can we call that perhaps certain of our Babylonian traditions?
Yes.
It's hard sometimes. You know, if you just have a little screwdriver and hammer to chip away at it, sometimes you need a jackhammer. And we need that supernatural empowerment to knock it out. But think about what this whole Torah portion is really talking about. One, it's telling us how are we going to do it. So first off, we have to have a heart that's changed, realizing that fruit, the first fruit of that land, belongs to Yah. And then second is that it's telling us, like Sandy brought up the book, Blessings or Curses, You Can Choose by Derek Prince. And we have chapter 28, which is talking about the blessings and the curses. So what is it really telling us? is that we must be able to dispossess anything that's living there. In other words, we got to cast it out. And because if we don't, it brings a curse. Or we might be able to recognize that the curse is living in us, and we're holding on to the wrong thing because it's become so strong in us. It's been so big in us. And we have to break loose of that. We have to expel it. We have to disinherit that which we inherited from our fathers, the evil things, and utterly bring to ruin and destroy it, so that Yah's ways, his kingdom, his rulership, our ability to faithfully follow him, have full loyalty to him, which is emunah, which is faith, can be fully active in our lives. That's a lifelong process, isn't it? Especially
all those traditions, all those things you were brought up with,
Yeah.
the world system, and
when
you
Eddie
have to get out of them.
when Eddie talked about the Zadok priesthood, and he talked about how their way of life looked nothing like what came out of Babylon.
Mhm.
So that way of righteousness is think, okay, all right, what other things do I need to push out? What other things has a strong grip in me? What other things that I need to deal with? I do recommend that book by Derek Prince. I
Derek
think
Prince
he
knows what he's talking
knocked it
about.
out of the ballpark.
Everybody should read
Blessings or
it.
curses, you can choose. And then this follow-up book to that, You Shall Expel Demons.
Mhm.
Absolutely
Yep.
a great sequel, because when Sandy was talking about it, everyone, we went, sometimes we read it together. She started reading, said, you got to come home. We need to go through this. We read it chapter by chapter together, but we stopped sometimes after a paragraph or even after a sentence and said, wait, stop right here. Let's talk about this and pray and break these curses. So we worked through the book together and recognized, wow, there's so much that was possessing our hearts, even though we've had faith, even though we were pastors, and even though we were walking through it. But you know what? Guess what? When that time period was 2008, when this outpouring of the Holy Spirit bringing revelation of the way of the Torah to God's people started around then. There was a remnant from before, but it just took hold of and just really came to light. The fulfillment of all those years of exile, and our eyes were open. Yeah.
You were talking about that second book. I read that both books.
Yeah.
And the second book where it gives those prayers, I actually wrote some of those prayers down so I could remember them. That expels demons.
Yeah.
And stuff. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wrote some of those down so I could memorize them.
Good. Yeah, because it's and when you write it, it's just like when they told the kings to write down the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, because there's something when you write it down, it sets some things inside that you can hold on to even better and stronger. So that's perfect. Jackie.
Even
Yes, it
even
does.
like, you might have a great grandfather that was in a lodge of some kind, or like some of these like what is it, Terry? Yes, Masons are the yes. But anyway, you need to go in and verbally break that, and then you need to replace it with what Yah says. In other words, where you emptied it out, you need to put Yah's word back in there, and you can go with the scriptures. But you need to say, you need to break this curse. Say, I'm not cursed. Whatever you need to say. But you get that thing off of you, and then you put back in Yeshua.
Mm-hmm. And now that you brought up the name, I want to hit one other point before we dismiss. And this is going to be really important. And it all has to do with the name and how the name was erased and how the Hasmoneans and the Pharisees removed the name. So let me read this verse here. And it says, and you shall answer, this is verse 5 of chapter 26, and you shall answer and say, wait a minute, verse 3, and you shall go to the priest who is in office at that time and say to him, I declare this day to Yahweh Elohim, I have entered the land which Yahweh swore to give to our fathers to give. Verse 2, I'm sorry. It's all part of this. And mid-verse, which you shall bring, he's talking about bringing the produce of the ground, which you shall bring from your land that Yahweh your Elohim gives you, and you shall put it in a basket and go to the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to establish his name. Okay, well, if you don't know his name, you don't know where it's established. Okay, so get this. This is a really interesting piece of history. The concept of an Elohim paying closer attention to the people when called upon by name led the Babylonians to avoid speaking the names of their pagan mighty ones for fear of being watched too closely. And during the time of the Babylonian exile of Yehuda, the Yehudim, the Jews, adopted the same practice while in captivity and retained the erroneous practice of not being permitted to speak the name of Yahweh. The Hasmoneans, who were the ruling dynasty in Yehuda around the period of 140 to 114 BCE, put an end to this wicked practice of being forbidden to speak the name of Yahweh. And sadly, after their time, the rabbinic authorities reinstated the prohibition of speaking the name of Yahweh. And by the time of Yeshua, the Messiah, anyone who was found speaking the name of Yahweh was considered to be a blasphemer and was the only blasphemy that was considered to be worthy of death as ordered by the rabbinic authorities. This very corrupt rule has caused so many people over the ages to be held in bondage to traditions and dogmas of men. And now we find once again that in these last days, a remnant people are rising up and calling upon and proclaiming the only name that saves, Yahweh. Huh? Email that to you? Okay. You have to remind me. So Yeshua means Yahweh is our Savior, and so by the vain and wicked traditions of man, we see that the Greek rendition of the Hellenized name of Jesus has done the same injustice that the early rabbinic authorities did in trying to nullify the use of the pure and true set-apart name of our Elohim.
Wow, yep.
So I thought I would end on that for something to chew on as well. But anyway, did y'all get something out of that today?
Yeah, good.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Well, let's close in prayer and we'll be dismissed. Father, we just thank you for this time that we've been able to gather and discuss these treasures hidden in your word.
Nuggets.
Because, Father, we want to be your treasured possession. You gave everything in order to possess this field and the treasure that was in it. And, Father, we're a coin in that treasure chest. Yeah. And we want to be rightfully possessed by you. So, Father, let your word settle within us and give us eyes to see and ears to hear so we can truly always be a people that communicate and establish firmly our relationship with you and that covenant that you established with us in the mighty name of Yeshua.